I never love anybody, I'll never have my heart broken. Is that noble? Because I'm making a decision out of fear? By the way, to tell yourself you're not making an emotional decision, you are. It's one out of fear. So, if you tell me that you never tried because you were afraid of failing, is that noble? That's cowardice. And here's what I want you guys to understand. Look, maturity does not come from years. You know, you separate time from maturity because they're different experiences, right? Time is one thing, but maturity really comes from exposure to stimulus that requires growth. Exposure to circumstances that are going to require you to grow. Guys, my divorce was one of the most devastating things that ever happened. Okay? I mean, it broke my heart. You know, watching my family slip through my fingers, and there's nothing I could do to save it. Broke my heart. I know no other way to say it. Having said that, it was one of the most profound experiences in my life, and it required growth of me in a way that probably nothing else did. I could almost measure my life in two halves. You know, before my divorce and after. Because I'll tell you this, nothing will force you to reconsider and change your life and the direction you're living and the way you do things like failure. Success doesn't, you know what, success tends to breed more of the same. Which makes sense, right? In ego, right? Probably ego. But success tends to reinforce itself. If I'm doing something well, I'm just going to keep doing more of the same because it's working for me. But you know what failure forces you to do? Failure forces you to look at yourself and say, something isn't working here, and I got to work on it. Now, don't get me wrong. I know people have gone through divorces and be like, I didn't do anything wrong. Are you one of those people that when you break up, it's always their fault? I'll bet you it's not. I bet you did some dumbass stuff too. You know what? The difference is you can't own up to it. And you can't look at yourself in the mirror and say, I got some flaws. And that was probably the best thing that happened to me from my divorce. And believe it or not, I'm grateful for it. I wish I didn't, you know, I wish my family didn't break apart. I hate that when my son comes down, he has to choose between, you know, staying with me tonight or my ex-wife. I hate that. But as a human being, I grew in a way that I never would have before. Okay? So, that brings me to, you know, guys, don't fear. Okay. I understand that you fear pain. I shouldn't tell you don't fear it, because it's a natural reaction. But pain, loss, grief stimulates growth. It does not have to break you. I would say you can't, life tempers you, forges you with the experiences, and you have to have the mind to go in to accept those lessons. And part of it, a lot of those lessons are going to be unfair. Unfair and painful. But you're doing nobody, at least of all yourself, any service if you run from it. Okay? So, and then you get to the argument of whether or not it's even fair. If you can't be honest with people, and this thing, did I ever tell you about that vulnerability expert? I think I did, right? Did I talk about that in this class?
No.
Okay, so there was this podcast, and it's taking too long, longer than I wanted. But there was this podcast I listened to with this, it was actually a TED Talk. And this woman was talking about how she's a vulnerability/shame expert. And she said that the essence of human intimacy and the root of it is vulnerability. Not strength, vulnerability. Ask yourself this: how many people in your life can you show who you really are to? Not the good things in your life, not the things you want people to think about you, but the things you really are. Your shame, your weakness, your fear, not because that's all you are, but that's some of what we are. And if you can't show, I mean, why don't we show those things? Because we're afraid of being judged. Right? We don't want people to judge us, and we don't want people to think we're something that maybe we really are. All right? We're ashamed. Maybe we're ashamed of what we are. Okay? Maybe you don't want it. If you're ashamed, why would you share with somebody else? But let me ask you this. If you had a friend, and some of you do, who could accept you despite knowing everything about you, your fears, your weakness, and your shame, and they can look at you and say, it's okay. It's okay. I accept you anyways. Isn't that a real friend? Isn't that a real friend? I mean, don't get me wrong, we got lots of people we know. How many people are real friends? And if you can't do that with your own partner, never mind a friend, if you're going to tell me you're going to share your heart with somebody and you can't show them who you are, then the question becomes, then what are you showing them? Do they even know who they got? And is it fair to them? Never mind, is it fair to you? That's you being selfish. Is it fair to the person that loves you that they can't know the real you? I would argue it's not fair to them. What is love? That love is based on a lie or a misunderstanding or incomplete knowledge. It's hard. So, by the way, for the record, it requires, if you see someone cry, is that weakness or strength? So this ties back to Obama. Okay. It all connects somehow. All right? It all comes back. So we get to Obama. That guy's crying. All right? Okay. Let me ask you this. If he's crying and that makes him weak, does that mean it's weak to cry? And then my question is it weak to grieve? I ask you this. Is not the appropriate response to many circumstances in life tears? What do I do when I tell my son that I can't keep our family together, that I failed him, that I've spent every day of his life with him? We walked every day together and talked for hours, all right? And I'm going to have to say goodbye to him. I'm not going to see him every day. I'll see him on the weekends. You know what it's like saying goodbye to your child under those circumstances? Am I weak if I cry? And let me ask you this. If I lied and told you I didn't cry, would you respect me more? I cried. Didn't want to. But I also didn't want to hide from my son. Didn't want to hide from him. Now I sat here and I told you that when my wife told you she wanted a divorce, I cried. I couldn't sleep that night. I don't remember when I could sleep. I don't remember. I don't remember how long it took. I know that I wanted to stay here as long as I could. I didn't want to go home because going home I had to see her. And in seeing her, I remembered how much it hurt. Like here I could pretend that she didn't exist for a little bit, even though I knew she did. I was afraid to go home. Now I can sit here and tell you I didn't do that. I did. Okay? Now the real question here is, can you accept vulnerability in somebody else? I can sit up here and pretend I'm something I'm not and ask you, is that a position of strength to lie about who I am? And if I do that, let me tell you the number one reason why I would. It would be because I would be afraid that you would judge me or that you would think less of me. By the way, if I give you that kind of power over me, that's a position of strength? That means I care too much about what you think about me. You know, it's funny, and this could be the last, this is where I end probably. You know, I know a lot of guys that they want to convince women that I'm a man. I don't need to convince a woman of anything. I don't care what you think about me. I am what I am. I think if you care so much about what somebody thinks about you, it's a position of weakness. It really is. You give them too much power over you. So, live honestly and openly. Love with an open. The end. All right.